Hey everybody, this is Matthew Movies coming at you with my review of the Santa Claus 2, the 2002 sequel to the 90s classic that I actually find to be fairly enjoyable. I know this movie has a lot of detractors, but I'm not one of them. I do not, by any stretch of the imagination, think it's as good as the first film. I think that there is kind of a little bit of a cloying feel to it, and there are times where it feels like they're trying too hard, and it just doesn't necessarily feel as natural, but there are parts of this story that I find really work and are very charming and make up for some of its lesser elements and overall make it to be an enjoyable film. But by no means perfect film, by no means a classic or a great film, but an enjoyable film. Tim Allen is back and playing Scott Calvin, and this plot of this movie is, instead of just becoming Santa Claus, which he dealt with in the previous film, now he finds out that there is another clause in the contract where he has to find a Mrs. Claus, and if he doesn't find it by Christmas, he's going to lose his Santa abilities and no longer be Santa. So he goes out back into the real world and he has to find a woman to marry, and it kind of puts this artificial clock on his romantic life. And I'll say this, they set up these stakes, and I thought that they did a pretty good job of letting you know what was the balance and why it was so important that he finds someone to be attracted to and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they also managed to, even though there was that rush timeline, make it feel like the relationship they ended up building was a well done one and an organic one, and one that felt pretty well developed. So I thought that was a major strength. And like I said, Tim Allen's back. I think he does a pretty stellar job in this movie. I'd say he's the best part of this movie overall. He plays the character the exact same way he did in the first one, which is not any big stretch, because I think most people probably realize that Tim Allen doesn't exactly have the best acting skills in the world. He pretty much plays himself in most things, or Buzz Lightyear, who's again a more grandiose version of himself. So it wasn't too big of a stretch to imagine that he would be able to pull off the character. But I thought he was back in this one. He was charming, and at the same time you could also kind of understand his frustrations. I mean, they introduced this whole storyline with his son, which I thought was fairly well handled. And like I said, obviously he has to find a Mrs. So they bring in Elizabeth Mitchell, who plays Carol, the woman he ends up going on to get involved with. And spoilers, not that there's any surprise to this at all, she ends up becoming the Mrs. Claus, and I thought that the relationship between the two of them was pretty well developed, and there was these moments between the two of them where there was a lot of chemistry on film, and like you could feel that like he was winning her over, especially the way they started off their relationship, where she came off like she was going to be this kind of harsh woman to be around, and then as they kind of showed more of who she really was and why she had kind of a bit of a front up, I thought that all worked pretty well. Then the way they introduced the way that she interacts with Scott's son, and I thought that was an interesting thing, where he's becomes kind of jaded by the fact that he doesn't have his father in his life, even though he's very supportive of his dad being Santa Claus. He doesn't like not having him around. So the way that they kind of play that whole thing and the relationship between the three of them, I thought was actually handled pretty well. And then they introduced a new character, the daughter of Scott's ex-wife and her new husband, and this little redhead girl who I think was very heartwarming throughout the movie. She has a very lovable energy to her. She seems like the type of kid that would be fun to be around, and there are times where I think they go a little bit too far with her, where they're trying to turn her into like almost like an Olsen twin or whatever, with that kind of over the top sweetness or whatever. But I felt like overall she was fairly well handled, and the way that she interacts with one of Scott's reindeers, I think was fun. And then things don't come to an end in the North Pole while Scott's trying to go off and find his new romantic interest. So they introduced this robotic Santa clone, essentially, who creates an army of nutcrackers who go around, and he's very militant. And I thought that whole thing was pretty funny, where he reads the handbook, and he thinks that all the rules have to be cracked down on, and he takes over and the whole rigmarole. And I thought that was all entertaining. And they bring back the two main elves who were his assistants, which the way that they are trying to cope with him being gone, and the new robotic Santa, and trying to fight back and keep things on par with where they should be. I thought I enjoyed all that. One of the things I thought that was the most fun that they added to this movie is they introduced this concept of the Legion of legendary, or the Council of Legendary Figures, I think it is, and they introduce, so it's got Father Time on it, Mother Nature, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, Cupid, Father Time. I think that might be it. I thought that that whole concept was a lot of fun to see these mythical beings that you have always grown up hearing about, seeing these interpretations of them and who they cast in each of the roles. I enjoyed all of that. I thought that was, you know, very, very well handled. But I gotta tell you, the moment in this movie that I think is most entertaining, and it's funny, they have a cameo by Molly Shannon in this movie, and I gotta tell you, she's an actress who a lot of the time I could, you know, take her or leave her. I'm not the biggest fan of hers. I feel like she is definitely a very over-the-top actress a lot of the time, but I thought her casting was perfect for this movie. She plays this woman that Scott ends up going on a date with, who is obsessed with Christmas, and like, I mean obsessed. She's like wearing the Christmas clothes and singing about Christmas in the middle of a restaurant and embarrassing him, and just, she totally commits to the role, and the character is written to be over the top, so I thought it really, really worked and was one of the funnest parts of this movie, which overall I think is fun. I like I said before, I don't think this movie is perfect by any of the stretch of the imagination. It's not a must-have or anything like that, but I think it's a fun family movie for Christmas, and it's thoroughly watchable. So if I was to give it a test out of 1 to 10, no, if I was going to grade it out of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it like a 7 or 7.5. A thoroughly watchable but not remarkable film. So those are my thoughts on the Santa Claus 2. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. If you're a fan of it, if you think I gave it too high a score, too low a score, whatever. Other than that, please, please, please hit that like button, hit the share button. It makes it much more likely that people will find out this video exists and come and check it out, which would be absolutely awesome, because I love talking to people about movies. And speaking of which, if you are new here or you just haven't done it yet, please, please, please hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, because like I said, I would love talking to people about new movies, and I love you to be one of them. Aside from all that though, have yourself a good day.